Imagine standing beneath the night sky and asking the oldest question humanity has ever asked. Is the universe the creation of a divine mind, or is it the result of natural laws unfolding over billions of years? That single question has shaped religions, inspired philosophers, and driven scientists to spend their lives trying to understand the nature of reality. In this video, we are going to explore one of the deepest debates in human history: the relationship between religion, the idea of God, and the scientific understanding of the universe. We'll look at how science approaches truth, how religion approaches meaning, and why these two perspectives often collide in fascinating ways. Before we go further, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss future videos exploring science, philosophy, and the mysteries of the universe. People approach me with this question constantly. It happens at universities, at conferences, even during casual conversations in everyday places like restaurants. Someone will eventually lean forward and ask, "You're a physicist, you study the quantum world. You've looked deep into the laws that govern matter and energy. So tell me honestly, is there a God? Did someone create all of this?" What they usually want is a simple answer. They want a neat, comfortable conclusion. Ideally, they want a scientific formula that either proves the existence of a cosmic creator watching over humanity or proves definitively that no such being exists. In other words, they want certainty. Human beings crave certainty. It makes the universe feel manageable. It gives us a sense of control over the unknown. Many people want a philosophical blanket they can wrap around themselves to quiet the anxiety that comes from living in a mysterious universe. But science doesn't offer that kind of comfort. Instead, science reveals a universe that is vast, strange, and often completely indifferent to human expectations. The deeper we look into reality, the more we discover that nature does not conform to our common sense or our emotional needs. And strangely enough, that realization is not depressing. It's breathtaking. If you're willing to stand in front of the unknown and admit that we don't have all the answers, the universe becomes far more exciting than any simple story could ever be. To explain this idea, I often think about a conversation I once had with a friend who is an artist. We were walking together when he picked up a flower and admired its beauty. He looked at the delicate shape of the petals, the color, the elegance of the plant itself. Then he said something interesting. He said that artists appreciate beauty, while scientists tend to destroy it by analyzing everything too much. According to him, once you begin breaking something down into molecules, equations, and physical processes, the magic disappears. But I completely disagree with that idea. When I look at a flower, I see the same beauty he sees. I can admire the color of the petals, the symmetry of the shape, and the elegance of its design. But science allows me to see something even deeper. Inside that flower are millions of living cells performing incredibly complex chemical reactions. The color of the petals isn't random. It comes from specific wavelengths of light interacting with pigments that evolved over millions of years. Those colors exist because certain insects are attracted to them. Bees, for example, can see different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum than humans can. The flower evolved to communicate visually with those insects in order to spread its pollen. Suddenly, the simple beauty of the flower expands into something much more fascinating. It becomes a story of evolution, chemistry, biology, and physics all working together. And if we go deeper still, we find atoms forming molecules, electrons moving around atomic nuclei, according to the strange probabilistic rules of quantum mechanics. The beauty doesn't disappear when we investigate nature. It multiplies. At the scale of the human eye, the flower is beautiful. At the microscopic level, it becomes even more intricate. At the molecular level, it reveals the astonishing complexity of chemistry. Science doesn't remove wonder from the world. It expands it. Now take that same idea and apply it to the entire universe. When people discuss religion and science, something very similar happens. A religious perspective often looks at the universe, the stars, the earth, human consciousness, and says, "Look at how beautiful it is. It must have been created by a divine power. It's a miracle." But the scientific response is slightly different. A scientist looks at the same universe and says, "Look how beautiful it is. Let's figure out how it works." And once we begin exploring that question, the answers we find reveal a cosmos so vast, so complex, and so astonishing that it reshapes how we think about existence itself. But before we go further, we need to clear up an important confusion that often appears in conversations about science and religion. When people ask whether science has disproved God, they usually forget that the word God can mean very different things depending on who is using it. There are really two completely different concepts of God that often get mixed together. The first idea is what we might call the philosophical or cosmic God. This is the idea of a grand architect, an ultimate intelligence responsible for the laws of nature themselves. When physicists study the universe, they encounter mathematical structures that are surprisingly elegant. Gravity bends space-time in a precise and predictable way. Electromagnetism follows Maxwell's equations with extraordinary accuracy. The strong and weak nuclear forces operate with specific patterns that allow atoms and matter to exist at all. When scientists look at these rules, they often feel a deep sense of awe. The universe seems to operate according to mathematical principles that are both simple and incredibly powerful. Some philosophers and physicists look at this beauty and say, perhaps there is a deeper intelligence behind it all, something that set the laws of physics in motion when the universe began. Something that set the laws of physics in motion when the universe began. And from a scientific point of view, that possibility cannot be completely ruled out. Science studies how the universe behaves, but it does not always answer the question of why the laws exist in the first place. If someone wants to imagine a cosmic architect who set the universe in motion 13.8 billion years ago, and then allowed it to evolve naturally according to those laws, science cannot definitively disprove that idea. But there is a second concept of God, and this one is very different. This is the personal God of traditional human religions. This is the God described in sacred texts, the God who intervenes in daily human affairs, performs miracles, and answers prayers. This personal God is often described as guiding the course of human history, rewarding believers, and watching over every individual life. But when we look at the universe through the lens of modern astronomy, the scale becomes almost impossible to comprehend. The Earth is simply a rocky sphere orbiting an ordinary star. The Sun is 1,000,000 times larger than Earth, yet it is just one of billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Today, scientists estimate the observable universe contains 2 trillion galaxies, each an island universe filled with billions of stars. When we consider that vast cosmic scale, the idea that the Creator is primarily focused on one particular species on one small planet begins to raise difficult questions. It forces us to rethink our place in the cosmos. To understand the universe, we must reflect on its sheer scale. Earth feels enormous with its vast oceans and mountains, but from a cosmic perspective, it is a tiny pale blue dot orbiting an average star. Our Sun is just one of 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. Our galaxy itself is one of trillions in the observable universe. When we look into deep space, we see a history stretching back 13.8 billion years. The first stars forged heavy elements like carbon and iron in spectacular supernova explosions. These elements became the building blocks for planets and eventually life itself. The atoms in your body were born in the hearts of stars. Every piece of iron in your blood was forged in a distant explosion. In a very real sense, we are all made of stardust. We are the universe experiencing itself. This scientific understanding creates a powerful shift in perspective. Instead of viewing humanity as the center of the universe, we begin to see ourselves as part of a much larger cosmic story. And that raises an interesting problem for traditional religious narratives. Many religious traditions describe the universe as if it were created primarily for the sake of human beings. The story often suggests that the creator of the entire cosmos is deeply concerned with the behavior of one particular species on one small planet. But when we look at the actual scale of the universe revealed by astronomy, that picture begins to look strangely disproportionate. Imagine building a theater the size of the entire solar system just to perform a tiny play about a single microscopic organism. The stage would stretch across unimaginable distances, yet the drama taking place on it would involve something almost invisible. In a similar way, modern cosmology shows us a universe of extraordinary scale and complexity. Billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, vast cosmic distances, and billions of years of history existed long before humanity appeared. Against that background, the idea that the entire universe was created mainly to observe human behavior begins to seem increasingly difficult to reconcile with the evidence. This does not necessarily disprove the existence of a cosmic creator, but it does challenge the very human-centered narratives that many religions developed thousands of years ago, when people had a far more limited understanding of the universe. Ancient cultures did not know about galaxies, black holes, or cosmic expansion. They believed the Earth was the center of everything, and they naturally imagined the universe as a stage designed primarily for human life. Science, however, reveals a different picture. It shows a universe that is vast beyond imagination, governed by mathematical laws that operate consistently across space and time. It is a universe that existed for billions of years before humanity appeared and will likely continue evolving long after we are gone. And once we begin to understand that reality, another important question emerges. The conflict between science and religion is not only about the size of the universe, it is also about the methods each system uses to search for truth. In other words, the tension between them is not just about different answers, but about completely different methods of asking questions. To understand this, we first need to look carefully at what science actually is. Many people think science is simply a large collection of facts that students memorize in school. Things like the planets of the solar system, the laws of motion, or the structure of atoms. But that is not the true essence of science. Science is a method. It is a disciplined way of investigating reality. At the core of this method lies one incredibly important principle: doubt. Scientists begin with questions rather than conclusions. They observe the world, develop ideas about how things might work, and then design experiments to test those ideas. If the results of the experiment contradict the theory must be changed or abandoned. It does not matter how elegant the theory appears, or how strongly someone believes in it. In science, nature itself is the final judge. This principle requires scientists to remain intellectually humble. Even the most successful theories are never treated as absolute truths. Newton's laws explained objects for centuries, yet they were later refined by Einstein. Einstein's theories themselves may one day be modified if new discoveries reveal deeper layers of reality. In other words, scientific knowledge is always provisional. It evolves as new evidence appears. Scientists are comfortable with uncertainty because uncertainty is what drives discovery. When a scientist encounters something they cannot explain, they do not panic. Instead, they become excited. The unknown is an opportunity. Religion, however, often operates very differently. Many religious systems begin with certainty rather than doubt. Sacred texts or traditions are treated as final authorities that provide answers about the nature of reality and the moral rules humans must follow. Faith is often defined as believing these claims even when evidence is limited or when contradictory information appears. In this framework, questioning core beliefs can sometimes be discouraged. Doubt may be seen as a weakness rather than a tool for learning. This difference creates a deep structural tension. Science thrives on questioning assumptions. Religion often asks followers to accept certain truths. When someone begins an investigation with the assumption that the final answer is already known, it becomes difficult to explore alternatives. This contrast becomes especially clear when we examine the strange discoveries of modern physics. The world of quantum mechanics is far more unusual than imagined. At the level of atoms and subatomic particles, nature behaves in ways that challenge everyday logic. Particles can exist in a state known as superposition, where they occupy multiple possible states simultaneously until a measurement is made. In experiments, electrons behave both like particles and like waves, depending on how they are observed. Even more astonishing is the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. When two particles become entangled, their properties become linked. Measuring one instantly influences the other, even if they are separated by enormous distances. These behaviors seem to violate our intuitive ideas about space, time, and cause and effect. Yet repeated experiments confirm that the universe really does behave this way at the quantum level. The lesson is clear. The universe does not adjust itself to match human expectations. Our theories must adjust to match the universe. This leads to a deeper question. If science reveals a universe without obvious built-in meaning, where do human values and morality come from? For centuries, moral teachings were delivered within religious stories. Ideas like compassion, generosity, and respect for human life were often presented alongside mythological elements, miracles, divine punishments, sacred laws, and supernatural events. Because these ideas were packaged together, many people came to believe that morality could not exist without the religious framework that carried it. But when we examine the issue more carefully, we begin to see that ethical behavior does not necessarily depend on supernatural authority. Human morality can arise from empathy and rational understanding. As social creatures, human beings evolved the ability to recognize the experiences of others. We understand that pain, suffering, and happiness are not unique to ourselves. This awareness allows us to imagine what life feels like for another person. Empathy encourages cooperation and discourages harm. Communities that develop trust, fairness, and mutual support tend to survive and prosper. Societies built on constant violence and betrayal quickly collapse. In this sense, moral behavior is not merely a religious command, it is a practical requirement for social life. Consider a simple question. Do you really need the threat of eternal punishment to stop yourself from harming another person? Do you need the promise of supernatural rewards to encourage you to help someone in need? Most people do not behave ethically because they fear divine punishment. They behave ethically because they recognize that others experience the world just as they do. Pain, fear, joy, and hope are shared human realities. Science also offers a powerful perspective on our connection to one another and to the universe itself. Modern astronomy and physics reveal that the atoms inside our bodies were created long before Earth existed. In the early universe, after the Big Bang, only the simplest elements, hydrogen and helium, were present. The heavier elements required for life did not yet exist. Those elements were formed inside massive stars. Over millions of years, these stars fused lighter elements into heavier ones in their cores. When the stars eventually exhausted their fuel, many of them exploded in supernovae, scattering those newly formed elements across space. The carbon that forms the structure of our DNA, the oxygen we breathe, the iron in our blood, and the calcium in our bones all originated in those ancient stellar explosions. In a very literal sense, every human being is made from material forged inside dying stars. This scientific realization changes the way we think about our place in the universe. Instead of being separate from nature, we are deeply connected to it. The same physical processes that shaped galaxies and stars eventually led to the formation of planets, oceans, living cells, and ultimately conscious minds capable of reflecting on their own existence. The human brain, with its billions of neurons and trillions of connections, represents one of the most complex structures known in the universe. Through this remarkable organ, the universe has developed the ability to observe itself. When we look at the night sky, the cosmos is in a sense looking back at itself through human awareness. This perspective can inspire a powerful sense of responsibility. Life appears to be rare and fragile. Our planet is a small oasis of living systems surrounded by an immense and often hostile cosmos. Recognizing this fragility encourages us to treat one another with care. Our lives are brief, and the opportunity to experience consciousness is extraordinarily precious. Science does not promise eternal life or supernatural rewards, but it offers something else, an understanding of how extraordinary existence itself really is. Each human life represents a fleeting moment in the long history of the universe. We are temporary arrangements of matter and energy that have become aware of their own existence. And rather than diminishing the value of life, this realization can make it far more meaningful. When we begin to understand how rare and fragile conscious existence truly is, every moment of life starts to feel more precious. Instead of seeing life as a temporary waiting room for some eternal destination, we begin to see it as the main event itself. Many people find the scientific description of life unsettling because it does not promise immortality. Religion often tells us that our consciousness will continue forever in another realm, that death is merely a transition into a different form of existence. Science, however, suggests something much more grounded in physical reality. The brain is an incredibly complex biological system, and consciousness appears to arise from the activity of billions of neurons. communicating through electrical and chemical signals. When the brain stops functioning, those signals cease and consciousness ends. At first glance, this idea may seem bleak, but it does not have to be. In fact, the insistence that human awareness must continue forever may reflect a kind of emotional arrogance. We are so attached to our own sense of identity that we struggle to imagine a universe that continues without us. But the universe existed for billions of years before we were born. For 13.8 billion years, matter and energy interacted according to the laws of physics without any awareness of our presence. During that immense span of time, galaxies formed, stars ignited, planets assembled, and chemical reactions slowly evolved into the first forms of life. For billions of years before your birth, you were not conscious, and the universe continued perfectly well without you. The same will eventually be true again after our lives end, and yet that does not make life meaningless. In fact, the temporary nature of life may be precisely what gives it value. Think of a symphony. An orchestra gathers in a concert hall and performs a magnificent piece of music. The melodies rise and fall, instruments blend together, and for a brief time the room is filled with something deeply moving, but eventually the music reaches its final note. The performance ends, the musicians leave the stage, and silence returns. Would you argue that the symphony was meaningless simply because it did not last forever? Of course not. The beauty of the music comes from the experience itself, from the brief moment when those sounds exist together. Its temporary nature does not reduce its value. In many ways, it enhances it. Human life can be viewed in a similar way. Each person is given a limited window of time, perhaps 80 or 90 years if they are fortunate. Within that brief period, we have the chance to experience the world, build relationships, explore ideas, create art, and contribute something meaningful to the lives of others. The fact that life eventually ends does not erase those experiences. Instead, it reminds us that time is precious. If you truly understand that this life is the only one you are guaranteed, you may feel a stronger motivation to use it wisely. You may feel compelled to treat other people with kindness because their opportunity to exist is just as fragile and temporary as your own. This perspective can create a powerful sense of shared responsibility. All of us are travelers on the same small planet, moving through the vast darkness of space together. We face the same challenges, the same uncertainties, and the same ultimate fate. Rather than dividing ourselves through tribal beliefs and ancient arguments, we might recognize that our survival depends on cooperation, empathy, and understanding. This does not mean that religious individuals are foolish or incapable of contributing to human knowledge. Throughout history, many brilliant scientists have also been deeply religious. Isaac Newton, one of the greatest physicists in history, devoted enormous amounts of time to studying theology and biblical prophecy. But Newton also illustrates an important lesson. When he was studying physics, Newton relied on observation, mathematics, and experimentation. Yet when he encountered questions he could not answer, such as why the gravitational interactions of planets did not destabilize the solar system over time, he sometimes invoked divine intervention as the explanation. In other words, God filled the gaps in scientific understanding. Later, scientists discovered natural explanations for many of these mysteries. French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace developed more advanced calculations that showed the solar system could remain stable through natural gravitational interactions alone. When Napoleon asked Laplace why God did not appear in his work on celestial mechanics, Laplace famously replied, "I had no need of that hypothesis." This example illustrates a recurring pattern in history. Whenever human knowledge reaches a boundary, people sometimes place God in the unknown space beyond it. Lightning was once attributed to divine anger until we understood electricity. Disease was once blamed on demons until we discovered bacteria and viruses. The diversity of life was once explained by supernatural design until Darwin revealed the process of evolution by natural selection. As science advances, these gaps in knowledge tend to shrink. This does not necessarily eliminate philosophical questions about existence, but it shows that natural explanations often replace supernatural ones as our understanding improves. So where does that leave us today? Modern science reveals a universe that is extraordinarily complex, governed by mathematical laws, and still full of mysteries. Dark matter, dark energy, the origin of the Big Bang, and the ultimate structure of reality remain unsolved questions. But instead of discouraging us, these mysteries drive curiosity. The universe becomes a puzzle that humanity is gradually learning to explore. Each discovery reveals new layers of complexity, new questions, and new possibilities. And perhaps that is the most remarkable part of all. We are tiny creatures living on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star in a vast cosmic ocean. Yet through curiosity, creativity, and scientific investigation, we have developed the ability to understand the universe that created us. We have built telescopes that peer billions of years into the past. We have constructed particle accelerators that reveal the smallest building blocks of matter. We have decoded the genetic instructions that shape life itself. All of this knowledge has emerged within just a few centuries of systematic scientific inquiry. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, something extraordinary becomes clear. The universe produced conscious beings capable of reflecting on their own origins. Through us, the cosmos has developed a way to observe and understand itself. That realization alone can inspire a sense of wonder as powerful as any religious vision. The night sky is not simply a decorative ceiling placed above humanity. It is the story of our origin, written in light, that has traveled across billions of years. And as we continue exploring that story, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The greatest adventure of all is not claiming that we already have the final answers. It is continuing to ask the questions.